There was a phrase in the house that echoed every day. Like poison mixed in the walls. Divorce me. I can't live with you. Li Wei lived in an ordinary flat in Beijing. He was a young man of 29, with a slight flicker of premature wrinkles on his face, but a deep, silent calm in his eyes. Flat No. 504, on the 6th floor, which was located in the eastern corner of an old building. If the first rays of the sun fell on his couch in the morning, he would have already woken up. His life was like a book with the same sentence, written over and over again on its pages, a slow, repetitive sentence. He wasn't much of a talker, but he had a clear heart. He believed that words were like flowers, withering away at excessive teasing. That's why he prefers work over words. Getting up early in the morning to go to work, coming home quietly in the evening, putting the mother's medicine boxes in order every morning at 7 o'clock, pressing the button of the blood pressure checking machine, noting the number, then preparing a glass of water and putting it with a pill, and then making dinner for his wife. Zhao Lin, that was his life. A life that goes on like a pendulum of a clock, in the same circle, without any change. But in this house, in the midst of these voiceless routines, there was a phrase that echoed daily, like poison dissolved in the walls. The phrase would come out of his wife, Zhao Lin's lips, float in the air, and cover everything in the flat with its poisonous glow. I can't live without you. The first time this phrase came was 3 years ago, just 18 months after their wedding. It was the same that day. Lei Wei had returned from work tired. Zhao Lin was sitting on the sofa, moving her fingers on the mobile screen. The dinner table was cold for the night. After a moment of silence, Zhao Lin didn't raise his head, just threw the phrase away. At the time, Li Wei thought it was just exhaustion. Or maybe she had done something that made her angry that day. He didn't answer. Silently warmed the food, put it in front of both of them, and began to eat. Zhao Lin didn't resist either. But the next day, and then the next week, and then every month, gradually it became a daily routine, such as drinking tea in the morning or closing the door. At first, Li thought he was angry. Maybe there's something missing. He tried to shorten his working hours, bringing small gifts for Zhao Lin, sometimes taking him out to dinner. But at every gift, she looked intently. At every invitation, she answered without hesitation. You don't understand. You don't know what I want. Then Levi thought it was just stubbornness. She was young. Life after marriage felt less. He worked with patience. He knew it wasn't about words. It was about time. Time heals every wound, heals every gulf. But he didn't know that time was running out in Zhao Lin's heart. The needles on her watch had stopped a while ago, and she wasn't even trying to turn them back on. He felt Levi's silence was weak. She would get lost in the colorful curtains of other people's lives on social media, the glitter of expensive cars, the pictures of expensive bags from unknown brands, the smiling faces with no worry lines. She would watch the weddings of her classmates, who would be in big hotels. The groomsmen would be from rich families. And then see her husband, who would take care of the responsibilities without making any noise. The mother's care, the house rent, the gas bills islands. It all seemed a burden to him, a burden that was crushing his dreams. She said, You're wrong. You don't have ambition. You're just living. Look, my cousin's husband just started a new business. Your boss has bought a new car. What do you have? This is an old building. It's a broken life. You're ruining my life. Lee listened to everything. Sitting at the dinner table, he kept looking at the rice on his plate. A storm rises within him. Words get stuck in his throat. But he doesn't get them out. He couldn't scream, because he knew it. Crying is not related. A scream is just an explosion that destroys everything and leaves silence. He preferred silence. But every night, as Zhao Lin closed the door to her room and lay her bed on the levy couch, a crack opened in her heart. The cracks were so fine that they could not be seen, but they were deep. And every day a new crack was hollowing out his being. At last the day came. It was an ordinary day. There was a light rain outside, which was slightly washing away the density of Beijing. Li came back from work. He had made for Zhao Lin his favorite dish, Hong Shao Ru. He put the food on the table and waited. Zhao Lin came from outside, the newly purchased handbag smashed on the couch. Her eyes were red. Maybe she was crying on the way, or just tired. The food was eaten quietly. It was just the sound of the chopsticks. Then Zhao Lin wiped his face, without looking at Li Wei, and said Today, I am getting married. I can't live anymore. This time, there was no anger in her voice. It was a tired, final sound. As if this is a decision that was made a long time ago, and now only remains to be announced. Leah looked at the window. Drops of rain were leaving marks on the glass. He took a deep breath. Then he quietly stood up. He opened the door of the cupboard next to the kitchen, where important papers were kept, pulled out a large file. He returned to the table, opened the file gently, and took out a thick envelope of a document from it and placed it on the table. The envelope read, "Mutual Agreement on Divorce." His hands were trembling. The fingers were white, as if they were bleeding. But his voice was very calm. "What do you have to do?" "I have signed. The rest will be decided by the judge." Zhao Lin looked at the envelope. For a moment, there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. Then immediately, a strange wave of joy, as if she had finally found what she had been waiting for years. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and straightened the papers. He didn't think for a moment. Didn't look at Levi. He just put the bag in his pocket. "I will go to the lawyer tomorrow morning." She stopped. "I'm staying with a friend." Li just nodded his head. Zhao Lin picked up her new handbag, headed for the door. He opened the door and paused for a moment. Without a sound, just a voice coloned, "What about your mother?" Levi replied, "I will manage." Liu Lin didn't answer. The door closed. The sound of his heels on the stairs diminished rapidly, until it was lost in the silence. Li stood in front of the table. He saw 2 plates on the dining table, one of which was still full. He slowly picked up both plates, taking them to the sink. He turned on the water and began to clean up. His hand trembled again, so much so that a plate slipped from his hand and fell to the floor and broke into pieces. He sat down and began to pick up the pieces. A sharp piece of shrapnel penetrated his finger. Blood began to flow. He stared at the blood, Then suddenly his shoulders began to throb. He sat on the ground and cried. Years of silence, years of effort, years of exhaustion, all were swept away in her tears. But nobody listened. The silence of the flat absorbed the sound of her crying. Zhao Lin, on the other hand, found the freedom really sweet in the early days. She started living at a friend's house, who kept congratulating her on her freedom. You're absolutely right. To live with such a man is worse than death. You're beautiful. You'll get better. There were no holds barred, no questions about why you were late, where you spent the money. She could stay out late into the night, meet whomever she wanted, and spend all her salary on herself. The process was fast. Levi agreed to everything. Of the household goods, he had taken only his personal books and clothes. Everything else was left to Zhao Lin, a small portion of the bank. Balance was also given to him. The lawyer was amazed. You are giving too much. You can give more than the legal right. He said, it's nothing. Outside the court for the last time, when the two signed, Zhao Lin said to Li Wei, you are indeed a good man, but goodness is not enough. Levi tried to smile, but his lips wouldn't move. He just nodded his head and walked away. Zhao Lin looked at his back, feeling a strange hollow victory. He thought he had won. He was free. Now it's his life. It would be what she wanted, but slowly the truth began to emerge. The flat was rented out. Now he has a responsibility. His salary, which previously seemed only enough for himself, was now insufficient to cover household expenses. She moved into a smaller and cheaper flat, but still spent half of her salary on rent. He didn't know how to cook. It was first made by Li. Now eating out would have been expensive. And it took time and effort to make at home. She would often eat noodles or fast food. There was also a problem at work. He was working in a private company. At first, when she returned home tired, Levi would press her feet. The food would be ready. Now, as soon as he returned home, he again had to face cooking, cleaning the house. Fatigue began to affect his performance. My friends have stopped calling. At first, they would attend his freedom parties. But when Zhao Lin began to cry about his troubles, the people began to move away. Everyone was busy in their work. The family members started making excuses. You yourself had decided, now bear with it. The woman who once underestimated her husband's silent love now began to wander the streets in silence, hoping that perhaps there would be a new light in life. Within a few months, the situation changed. She focused on her situation. Clothes fairs began because there was no time to go to the laundry or to try to save money. The glow in his eyes was a sign of youth and hope. Now, he was just tired and discouraged. One day he was fired. The company was downsizing, and its performance was the weakest. He tried to find more jobs, but around the age of 30, without any special skills. The competition was stiff. The saving is over. Couldn't pay rent. The owner asked to vacate the apartment. That night, he wandered the streets. For the first time, he realized how precious home was. The same old flat, 500 for, with poor floor tiles, with no ventilation in the kitchen, but where hot food was always ready, where Li Wei planted plants for her mother on a small balcony. He spent the night under a bridge. It was cold, and she was shivering. The next morning he realized he had nothing left. The hand was stretched out. The same hands with which she had picked up the divorce papers were now begging. She would sit by the side of the road, with a piece of paper in front of her that read, "Need help." People would come. Sometimes they would put a coin, but often they would ignore it. She slept under the bridge at night and sat by the side of the road during the day. Sometimes she told herself that it was all temporary, that she would get a new job tomorrow. But she knew that it was a dark tunnel with no end in sight. During this time, she saw her old photos on social media, glittering, wearing expensive clothes, in expensive restaurants. Now the pictures make it look like it. He looked at the pages of his friends, who were still sharing their wonderful lives. He stopped following them, because now his place was beneath them, far below. One day he had a fever. It was cold, and the body ached. She lay down under the bridge, hoping for someone to come. But nobody came. She thought, if she had been with Levay, he would have come to feed her tea when needed, put cold water on her forehead, called for a doctor. But he thought it was wrong. When it wasn't there, life was empty. Levi's life also changed, but quietly. The first week after the divorce, he went to his mother. The mother had a heart disease, and now she needed her son. Leeway focused all her attention on her mother and work. He worked at a small accounting firm where he handled accounts for clients. His work was modest, but his honesty and understanding won the trust of the people. He felt that people were beginning to see his silence as a sign of confidence, not weakness. He knew that there is a lot of noise in the world, and only a person who is silent can hear and understand reality better. He slowly began to invest. He bought small pieces of property on the outskirts of the city, which had little value but were likely to grow in the future. There was no noise, no noise. He would read books, analyze the market, and patiently wait for an opportunity. Over time, it began to take its place. The man who had once been called a failure was now making decisions. He had wealth now, but he did not change his way of life. He lived in a normal flat, wore normal clothes. Only that the mother's care had improved, and better doctors had been found for treatment. Meanwhile, his mother's health continued to deteriorate. One day he came home. Lee rushed him to the hospital. Doctors said the operation was necessary, but risky. Lee approved the operation. He sat in the hospital room, looked at his mother's face, and prayed. He was not a religious man, but at that moment he felt the need for some power. My mother was in the ICU. He stayed there day and night. Meanwhile, he met a nurse, Mei Lin. She wasn't particularly pretty, but she had a calm look on her face. She always wore simple clothes, spoke little, but when she spoke softly. She was gentle with the patients, understanding their needs without speaking. One day, Levi's mother came to her senses. They were thirsty. Mei Lin immediately picked up the glass of water, put her hand under his head, and slowly drank it. Her hand was on her mother's head, like a daughter taking care of her mother. Levi saw this scene, and his heart was filled. He had not seen such kindness and comfort in a woman in years. My mother slowly began to recover. I take care of them every day. He didn't ask for anything or complain. She was just doing her job. One day, she tried to talk to him. You work very hard. Mi Lin smiled and replied, "This is my work. It's nice to see patients when they're better." She said that she came from the villages. Her parents are also sick, and she sends money to take care of them. Her own life was not easy, but she never cried about her problems. Li Wei saw in the woman a calm she hadn't felt in years. The peace that came not from wealth or fame, but from love of one's work and service to others. Slowly, respect took over, then trust. He talked to me every day. First about the health of the mother, then on small things. His words were not deep, but there was a natural compassion in everything. One day, Mei Lin said to Li Wei, "You look very tired. Go home and rest. I'll take care of your mother." Li Wei refused, but Mei Lin insisted. "If you fall ill yourself, who will take care of your mother?" Li's heart sank when he heard that statement. He remembered that Zhao Lin had never paid attention to his fatigue. His shortcomings were always noted. He went home on Mei Lin's advice and was able to sleep fully for the first time in years. When he arrived at the hospital the next day, Mei Lin had a cup of tea ready for him. "It's been a good day," sighed. It was a small thing, but a big one. He felt that his silence was being understood, his hard work was being appreciated. The mother returned home. Lei Wei thanked Mei Lin and invited her to come to his house. Lin nodded his head, but agreed. She came home, met her mother, and left after drinking. The mother said to Levi, "This girl is good. Quiet like you, but good at heart." Levi smiled and replied, "Yes, Mom." Chimi Wei, Li Wei, and Mei Lin's meetings became regular. They walked together, go to the market, or eat achi home. There was no love between them, no emotion. There was only a deep peace, a natural harmony. One day in the cold weather, Li Wei sent a message of marriage to Mei Lin, not in the traditional way, but through a letter. The letter read, "I cannot speak much, but I promise that I will understand your every silence, take care of your every need. If you can accept my simplicity, my life can begin with you." Mei Lin replied, "Silence is the best thing. I understand your silence." There was no big wedding. Only close relatives were fed, and then both began to live in a new house. This house was bigger than the first flat, but not so big as to look pretentious. There was a separate room for my mother and a small garden, where I began to plant flowers. Levi was now rich, but more precious than his wealth was the peace of his face. He knew that wealth is temporary, but peace is always there. Meanwhile, Zhao Lin's condition was getting worse by the day. Winter had come, and she was shivering under the bridge. He had high fever. She hadn't eaten for days, only drinking water. The body answered. She lay down under the bridge, closed her eyes, and waited for death. People are getting closer. Some looked at him, but he didn't stop. Everyone had their own problems. City life was fast-paced, and everyone was on the run. At that moment, a woman stopped. She was wearing simple clothes, with a shopping bag in her hand. She saw Zhao Lin and approached him without hesitation. He placed his hand on her forehead. "You have a fever. You must go to the hospital." Lana opened her eyes. In a dim glance, he saw the face of a woman who was worried. She said something, but there was no sound. The woman supported him, picked him up, and called a taxi from a nearby stand. He took her to the hospital in an emergency. The doctor prescribed antibiotics. She sat there all day. When Zhao Lin regained consciousness, he gave her a drink of water and said, "You should rest. You are weak." Zhao Lin asked, his voice weak, "Who are you? Why did you help me?" She smiled and said, "I'm fine. I'm a nurse here. You saw it. You had to help." Zhao Lin thanked him. Milin ordered food for him and also gave him some money. "Take this. Take food for a few days." A few days later, when Zhao Lin got better, she asked the hospital staff about Mei Lin. Another nurse said, "Oh, Mi Lin? He's very good. He has recently been married. Her husband is a good man, Bardot." "What about your husband?" Liu Lin asked. He is also a very quiet man, but has a good heart." She had met Mei Lin while in her mother's care. Hearing this name, Zhao Lin's body trembled. Levi, the man she'd married. He was now Lana's husband. For the first time, he understood. He realized that Li Wei had never retaliated. He was just living his life. Life has changed. She had left a man who knew true love and faithfulness. And now she herself had lost love and faithfulness. She walked out of the hospital and sat on the side of the road. He looked at the sky. There were clouds, but no sun. Tears welled up in his eyes, but no one was listening. There was no one to put his hand on his head, no one to give him water. She was utterly alone. A few months later, Zhao Lin saw Li Wei and Mi Lin together. She was passing by a park, where they had both come for a walk. Li Wei was holding Mi Lin's hand, and Mi Lin was smiling. Both of them were wearing ordinary clothes, but there was a glow on their faces. The glow that comes only from peace and love. Zhao Lin hid behind a tree. His heart was beating fast. She was watching. Mei Lin said something to Li Wei, and Li Wei responded with a smile. They both sat down on a bench. Mei Lin took out a bottle of water from her bag and gave it to Li Wei. Li Wei drank, then gave it back to Mei Lin. This small movement was also so natural, so harmonious. Then Mi Lin said softly. Zhao Lin read the lips from a distance. "You have not said anything for 7 days. If you have anything to say, let me know." Li looked at Li. Tears came into his eyes. It wasn't sadness. It was gratitude. Thankfully, his silence was no longer considered a weakness. Thankfully, his silence was understood and appreciated. He pressed Mi Lin's hand and said, "I don't need to say anything. You understand everything." Zhao Lin stood there, watching the scene. She remembered the man she used to tell every day that I can't be with you. The man who was always silent, whom she considered a failure. Today he was at peace with someone else, and she herself was stumbling. She realized that a divorce doesn't just break a relationship. Sometimes divorce breaks the pride, but that's when it's too late. That's when you realize what you've lost. And then you realize that that thing won't come back to you. Li took a look at it. She was behind the tree, but she might have seen it. He wasn't proud or hated. It was just silence. A silence that said everything and said nothing. Then he got up and left with his wife. Mi Lin held her hand, and the two walked away. On the way to the park, where the sun was setting behind the trees, Li came out of the tree. She sat on the ground. He looked at his hands, which had become wet and ragged. He looked at his clothes, which were torn. He remembered his life, which was scattered like papers. She tried to pull out the papers. One by one, the memories came together. But the time was out of his hands. Time flowed like a river, and she could only watch, standing by the river. It was evening. Lamps lit up near the road. Zhao Lin got up and walked back to the bridge. Behind him, on the corridors of the park, were the sounds of couples laughing. But the voice didn't reach him. She could only hear the sound of his footsteps, echoing across the empty street. And so, the love of a silent man, never understood, blossomed into a new home. And the pride of a woman, who always spoke, sank into silence. Life has done justice. Without any noise, without any announcement. It's just been. The city of Beijing continued on its way. New people came to Flat No, 500 for. Old trees were replaced by new ones. And time, as always, flowed quietly.